Hi, welcome to Empower Her. I'm Priya, and I have a very special guest with me today. Hi, Christine. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, Priya. How are you?
I'm good as well. So, really excited to talk to you today. And, we're gonna cover so many things today, but I just want to start with, a quick introduction about yourself. So, if you can just, give like a brief intro about yourself.
Sure. So, my name is Christine Duguay, and I currently live in the interior of British Columbia with my husband and my dog, Mr. Mingus. I'm originally from the East Coast, moved to the West Coast many years ago, and I'm currently head of leadership and employee development at AVIC.
Amazing. Thank you for that introduction. And yeah, I basically wanted to have you on my podcast because, obviously, I've worked with you when I was working at Avic, but yeah, I just had some, I think, no, some interactions with you, and I was just, really impressed with those interactions and just, really I guess those interactions were like quite introspective, I would say. And, I am really interested in like mental health and then also, mindfulness as well. And I do remember, you would run like these mindful activities over there as well. And yeah, I was just really glad that those happened. And so, yeah, so I just wanted to also have you here because your role is also quite unique in certain ways, and not a lot of companies have this role, and I just wanted to talk about this role so that people can learn about it and also see that okay, this there is this great option of a career in this role as well, because even myself, I had no idea about this role as a career path.
Mm.
And so yeah, that's why it was quite interesting to me, and I was curious to know about this role that you're working in, how you basically end up in this role. And so yeah, so let's get started with a little bit about how you basically got started. So can you talk a little bit about your education? What kind of things were you interested in when you were back in school?
So early on in my career, I met some people who saw things in me that I didn't see in myself, and they helped me in my career. And that's when I decided that that's also what I wanted to do. So I went off and studied adult education because I wanted to be able to design learning that was meaningful and impactful for people. And so my career started off in hospitality, working as a server and a bartender and then a manager. And I mostly worked in high end hotels across Canada and learned a lot about people. And that was really helpful for me.
Mhm.
Now, working in hospitality wasn't always easy, obviously.
Mhm.
Working in Quebec um, was a little tricky because it's a very hierarchical formula that they use. It's embedded in old traditions. So opportunities for women were sometimes limited there. And when I
Mhm.
moved to Vancouver, all of a sudden, all these doors opened for me because of my experience and because I am bilingual. I speak French and English.
Mhm.
So later on, what I found most challenging was getting people to feel good about the work that they were doing. A lot of people question themselves. They question, am I doing a good job? Should I be doing better? Am I in the right role, etc.? And I found myself gravitating towards that a lot with folks. People started talking to me about that. And I really enjoyed that part of the work. And that's what led me into learning and development. So doing a degree in adult education was then helpful in understanding how adults learn, And that's evolved in the last 10 years as well, because we now work in a very hybrid or remote environment. So teaching people through the web, through Zoom, is much more different than
Mhm.
teaching people live in a classroom. You live and experience and feel a lot of things when you're in a room with people. You feel their emotions, you
Mhm.
feel their interest and their passion, and you can see from the reflections in their faces whether they understand what you're saying. They're excited by it, they're bored, some of them fall asleep, all of these things happen. But in a Zoom environment, it's really difficult to do.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the challenges that I face now, as well as, you
Mm.
know, constantly trying to prove the return on investment for learning and development. That's a big challenge as well. So, how do we demonstrate the value of learning and development in organizations? It takes
Mm.
creativity and consistency in doing that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, talking about how you transitioned from hospitality to now learning and education, how did that happen?
Well, I think what happened is when you manage a team, you spend a lot of time sort of mentoring younger people who are learning how to give good service. And so you're doing a lot of training, you're doing a lot of, mentoring with young folks. And I happen to be serving a group of people from the Royal Bank of Canada. And I said to them when I served them, Bon appetit. And they said, Hey, wait a minute, you speak French? We need people who speak French at our office. Would you be interested in meeting with us for a job? And I thought, sure, why not? And that's how I got out of hospitality and into the corporate world. And so I was able to learn
Mhm.
working with them. They gave me a great opportunity right off early in my career. And from there, I just kind of navigated towards other types of industries as well.
Mhm.
Did end up back in travel and leisure, but it was a different approach. And what I've learned over the years is that it doesn't matter what industry you work in, my work focuses on the people.
Mm.
And the consistency there is that people aspire to
Mhm.
better. People want to learn. People are curious.
Mhm.
And so, regardless of what industry I'm working in, my work is very consistent throughout.
Mhm. Definitely. So, let's talk a little bit about, challenges. So, you talked a little bit about, obviously the challenge of working remotely and, with Zoom meetings, and obviously that is a huge challenge for anyone. But were there any other challenges that you faced when you transitioned into education?
I think some of the challenges were really around what did those roles mean in organizations? What did they want from that particular role? And it varies.
Mhm.
As you know, working with AVIC, you were part of revenue enablement, which is one way of contributing to an organization that has a sales
Mhm.
focus.
Mhm.
And I've done some of that. I've done a lot of that. So kind of worked in different, areas of learning and development. But where I found myself being most challenged is more at the corporate level. Like, what do our people need,
Mhm.
really need, to be able to work well and perform at their best?
Mhm.
And that's very challenging. And sometimes when you work with organizations who don't necessarily have all the resources to be able to give you that information, the challenge then becomes, how do we figure out what we need in the organization? So that's one of the biggest challenges that I found. The second is getting organizations to value learning and development, not only because they like Christine as a learning and development person, but seeing it as a function in the organization, something that is valuable and important to the progress and continued success of an organization, investing in their people. Those are some of the bigger challenges that still today I face.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, what have you learned from those challenges?
Mhm. I think what I've learned is to get really creative, um, and to be consistent in the work that I do. Now I know the questions to ask to get
Mhm.
really clear about what you need. Even in the interview process, when I'm interviewing with organizations, I ask the right questions that are going to give me the information that's going to help me determine whether that's the right place for me or not. Although I'm able to work with limited resources and usually do, once again, I'm a one person department
Mhm.
for 300 people.
Mhm.
And I'm used to that. That's okay. But it's again, staying consistent and being creative
Mhm.
in the way that I approach my work. That's the key.
Yeah, I think that's really something that I kind of like I struggle with as well, because like when you're looking for opportunities, or if any opportunities come to you, it's always challenging to see if, those align with your values and goals. And I think I'm still working on that, where I kind of like ask different questions to see, okay, is this place really for me, or is this role really for me? So I think a lot of people go through this whole journey.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm really curious on, what can you give like a few examples of what kind of questions do you ask, or what do you think, like, if you had to give someone advice on this?
Mm-hmm. I think you talked about values and what's important to you and whether the role is a good fit for you or not. I think it's about sitting down and really determining what is important for you. What do
Mhm.
you want to achieve? Where do you see that you can add value? And
Mhm.
then trying to determine whether the organization you're interviewing with also values that,
Mhm.
or are they just filling a role?
Mhm.
And asking them, what are your aspirations for this role? Where would you like to see this role go? What
Mhm.
are some of the most important things that you expect this person to be able to achieve in
Mhm.
this role, whether it's short term or long term? Those
Mhm.
are some of the questions that give you a sense of, okay, this is what they're going to be expecting of me. Does that fit with what I want to do? Does
Mhm.
that fit with my capabilities and my knowledge and my interests?
Mhm.
And am I going to be able to do that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes I would also say, if you don't think that you'll be able to do that, but that you think you can learn how to do that, do it.
Mhm.
Don't let imposter syndrome limit you from doing something that's outside of your comfort zone,
Mhm.
because that's where you learn and grow the most.
Mhm.
Being uncomfortable with something is scary,
Mhm.
um, and there's fear associated with that. And oftentimes women fall into that bracket of, I'm not qualified enough, or I
Mhm.
don't know enough, or they question their expertise
Mhm.
instead of just saying, hey, I'll learn as I go, you know. And that was a lesson my father taught me when I was very young. He used to say, just jump and you can grow your wings on the way down.
Mhm.
Trust that you'll be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's really exciting as well,
Mhm.
is determining, what they expect and whether you're going to be able to fulfill. And if there are elements of that that you've never experienced before, but that you think would be a great learning experience for you, do it.
Mhm.
Say, hey, I have no experience in that, but I really think that I could learn that and I want to try it.
Mhm.
This is how I could see myself doing this for you.
Mhm.
And the other thing I would also encourage people to ask in interviews is, who would be my support system in this organization?
Mhm.
Who are
Yeah.
my allies here? Yeah, exactly. And I find that oftentimes when people join an organization, they forget to ask about, so who should be in my social network? Who do I need to meet in the organization that's going to be critical to my job here? And we
Mhm.
forget that aspect of it. And it's really important
Mhm.
for our work to be able to have those social connections, that to build that network. It takes a long time for people to build a network in an organization.
Yeah.
And so speaking to that from the get go is really important as well.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I think I agree with you absolutely with, what you said. Like, you surprise yourself a lot of times where, you think that, oh, like, I don't have the skill to do this, or, I'm not qualified to do this. And, that has happened with me when I started my career in sales, and it was like a completely solo sales role and like hardcore sales. And I went into that role with the mindset that, it's not for me, and I won't be able to do this. I won't be able to succeed in this role. I am an introvert, and there's also like this mindset associated or stereotype with sales that, with sales, you need to be loud and extrovert and cheerful. And I am an introvert. So I was like, that doesn't match. So I don't think it's going to be, something successful. So, but, you know, things happened and I ended up with that opportunity. And then, few years later down the line, I was like, achieving things and, having success in that. And I was actually surprised, like genuinely I was in shock. I was like, how how is this happening?
Hmm.
So I did learn those skills, and I definitely, kind of break that stereotype in my mind that, okay, no, you can be an introvert, you can also be in sales, you can,
Absolutely.
interact with those customers, and they wouldn't even know that, what your real personality is. So yeah, I mean, that's why I wanted to share this story.
It's a great story, Priya. And we often forget that we are also customers.
Mhm.
Um, Introverts like introverts.
Yeah.
So sometimes selling to someone that you can resonate with because they're an introvert like you works really, really well. So
Yeah.
I think that there's everyone's uniqueness brings value to an organization,
Mhm.
regardless of, we've got these personas that we associate to certain roles that don't necessarily fit anymore.
Mhm.
We're dealing with humans, we're complex, we're diverse, we're unique. And
Mhm.
so I think there's room for everybody.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about, I think you mentioned a little bit when you were, living on the East Coast, that you saw there was like a little bit of difference with, how women were succeeding in their careers, or what kind of like career growth they were having. So is did you see that even in like different industries that you worked with, or like what were
Mm-hmm.
your observations with that?
Mm-hmm. There are certainly certain industries where it's a little bit tougher for women. Certainly, when I worked in engineering,
Mhm.
doing some research at the time, the statistics were a little grim in terms of how many women who graduate as engineers actually go on to work in engineering.
Mhm.
Those numbers were very low at the time. A
Mhm.
lot of women are pushed into manager roles because they're seen as caregivers as opposed to becoming subject matter experts in a particular area of engineering.
Mhm.
There is a mentality in that industry that made it difficult sometimes for women, although not all organizations are like that for sure. But there are some that are still, depending on what field you're in, mining and is a little bit of a rougher industry. So it's got a little bit more of a male dominated profile. So
Mhm.
yeah, there are some industries that make it a little bit difficult, and then there are others that make it easier for women as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. Okay, and then the role that you're currently in, is there a difference that you've seen with like genders in that? Is it, or is it like mostly balanced? As much as
I,
it.
yeah, I find that in learning and development, um, I find a higher percentage of women in that field for sure.
Mhm,
Although there are, I have a network where there is a good percentage of men as well, but
mhm,
definitely more women in that in learning and development.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, with even customer success as well, which which was the role that I was working in, and I was just like doing a little bit of research on that, and I had come across like these numbers and studies that were done, and it was really interesting to see that when actually this role was introduced, or this field or department of customer success, it was mostly made up of women. And over the years, now I think it has been more than maybe 20 years,
Mhm.
that number has now gone down significantly. And yeah, that was really surprising to see that, how things change. And for whatever reason, I think obviously there was a huge impact because of COVID. That's when a lot of women left their jobs. So maybe that's one of the contributing factors. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's really interesting to see how that changes.
It certainly does. And I think that with women shifting out of the more traditional roles into a broader work field, the shuffling happens on both sides,
Mhm,
right? So if women are moving away from these types of jobs, moving towards jobs that men have traditionally done, those men might be shifting as well. So I think that in all industries, there's a shift happening.
mhm,
Um, and I think that we are paying a lot more attention to that diversity and that balance as
mhm.
well.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that a lot of organizations have DEI departments and other departments to make sure that everyone is following in the right things to do. And obviously everyone wants to do the right thing, and there are so many stereotypes, biases everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think that we, need to add certain things or make changes to certain things when it comes to equality or equity or inclusion, and making sure that any interviews that happen, they go without biases,
Mm-hmm.
or leadership roles that get filled,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have any biases.
Right.
Yeah.
And and it all comes down to education, right? How do we educate our people? How do we are all biased. We're all biased. We all grow up in our culture, in our, countries sometimes, in our communities. And so we have biases, every single one of us. And it's not a bad thing, but when it affects the opportunities and the life of other people in a negative way, then we have a problem.
Mhm,
And so education in organizations is the key, and really paying attention to, well, what is the diversity in your organization? What are your goals as an organization in terms of ensuring that diversity?
mhm,
So, I've worked in organizations who were extremely vocal about all of the things that they were doing.
mhm,
And what I particularly appreciated about AVIC was we are just focusing on our people. We're not focusing on the image we're trying to project externally. We're
mhm,
really focusing on doing the work internally.
mhm,
And so that means we're going to educate ourselves. We're going to share stories. We're
mhm,
going to tell each other what it feels like when a woman is, what microaggressions might look like, or how a bias might affect us.
mhm,
We pay attention to pay equity. We pay attention to, the diversity that we have at different levels in the organization and on different teams.
mhm.
And I think that, a lot of organizations have set these standards for themselves, and it makes it difficult because people who are diverse will look at an organization. And if they do not see diversity in that organization, might not be so tempted to apply there.
Yeah.
So that makes it even more difficult for us
Mm-hmm.
to have more diversity because we're actually not attracting these people. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a variety of different things. And I think it starts with the talent acquisition piece. Where are we reaching out for candidates?
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of candidates are we interviewing? Are we balancing things out? And then how do we onboard these people? How do we get their social network going? How do we encourage their career path? How do we, work through them, through their careers with them? How do we create that employee experience where everyone feels that they have the same opportunities in the organization? And that's ongoing work for any organization. I don't think anyone has gotten that, 100% dialed. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. So, what advice would you give to someone who wants to have a career path in learning and education and who wants to end up in a role, working in a corporate and educating people?
Mm-hmm. I think really, well, the education piece is first and foremost. Understanding how adults learn. So I would always encourage someone to educate themselves in adult education, looking at the different models and so on. And there's a lot of different courses that you can take for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing is building a network of learning and development people
Mm-hmm.
because you continuously learn,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my work requires a lot of research, which leads to new ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so having an L&D community is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very generous community. We share resources and knowledge because that's what we do. It wouldn't make sense if we held on to our knowledge. It kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
But having that community, understanding what it is that organizations need is really critical. And then moving into that role in an organization is really shifting a focus around the people,
Mm-hmm.
and really trying to assess how are our people performing. What are the skills that they need? Do they need upskilling? Do they need new skills? Do they need coaching? Do they need mentoring? What do they need at each stage of their careers? And also being aware that um, not everybody wants the same things. Not everybody is in the same phase of their lives,
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that and honoring that in the people in your organizations as well. So, for example, if you're working with someone on a career plan and they're saying, I'm pretty happy where I am right now because I've got young children at home and I want to be able to focus my attention there.
Mm-hmm.
That's their situation today. In
Mm-hmm.
4 years from now, those children might be in school, and then all of a sudden they say, okay, I've got a lot more time. I
Mm-hmm.
want to now start working towards a path to become a leader or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So honoring those phases in people's lives is really important
Yeah.
as you're moving into that role. So I would say educate yourself on adult education, on what are that really paying attention to what the needs are of people at the different stages of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the demographics of your organization because those needs are going to differ.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a high percentage of your people that are in their early 30s, their
Mm-hmm.
needs are very different from people who are in their 50s or people who are just starting out their careers. These are some of the things you want to pay attention to as you start to think about going into that field and really looking at, well, what is the strategy we need to put in place for this organization in order to meet our company objectives and key results.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, talking about leadership roles, um, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this is a fact that a lot of women do struggle with leadership roles. So, they don't mostly get the opportunity, and Also there's like imposter syndrome as well, where you're like, how can I see myself as a leader? I don't know what I'm doing. Or, even if I get that job, how am I going to do this? I don't know anything about it. So there's so many aspects of that. But if you had to give advice on that to
Mhm.
women on how they can basically, you know grow in their career and go into like a leadership role, whether it's managing a team or being a subject matter expert, how can they navigate that, I guess?
Mhm. I think it comes down to who you want to be as a leader. The question I put to young people often is, what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room?
Mm-hmm.
And that is really what you create your sort of leadership brand around. These are the things that matter to me. This is what I want to develop as a leader. And leadership um, is something that you grow. A manager is a job and a title. So
Mm-hmm.
there are different skill sets that you need there for sure, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But growing yourself into a leader means many different things for many different people. And if you Google leadership, you're going to get, billions of responses to that particular word, right? But
Mm-hmm.
what does it mean for you? What kind of leader do you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
One person that I follow and admire a lot is Simon Sinek, and he talks about servant leadership. And I think that is what the world needs. That's my personal opinion. I think we need servant leadership, people who are um, open to other people and really pay attention
Mm-hmm.
and include people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a great way to be a leader. And when people in the room say, hey, if you need something, go see Priya.
Mm-hmm.
She's your go-to person. She's very thoughtful. She's kind. She explains things clearly. She's, focused, all of these things. That's what you want to work on when you're working on your leadership brand, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
When you're thinking about management, these are more, how are you going to manage the work to be able to meet the objectives and goals of an organization? It's
Mm-hmm.
much more strategic.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are different things that you need to learn at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, differentiating that right away is really important for people. And a lot of times young people think, oh, I need to move up into a manager role to be more successful.
Mm-hmm.
I would say not necessarily, and not everybody's cut out for it, right? Being an individual contributor and being successful means that you're focusing on yourself and all the things that you can do to get better, to do a better job.
Mm-hmm.
When you start leading a team or managing a team,
Mm-hmm.
it that changes. It's no longer about you, it's about them.
Mm-hmm.
Their success is your success. If they fail, you fail, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a different mindset. So I think that's the key, and for women as well, is really focusing on what kind of leader you want to be and what industry. Do you want to lead a team, or do you want to be that expert in the organization that people will reach out to for special projects or for assistance or whatever it might be? And then really zoning in on getting that expertise that you need in order to become the best leader that you can be. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that leadership is something, it's something that anybody at any level in an organization can do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think yeah, you made a great point, because that's absolutely what had been like my mindset as well when I was, starting off in my career. I was like, okay, I'm going to start with like an executive, or and then move up to this rank, and this is how my growth will happen. And yeah, so it was like very recently, just a couple of years back, when I started to question, and I was like, do I really want this? Do I even know what that looks like?
Mm,
Do I even know what a manager does? And do I really want to do this? And what, and as you said, like having your own definition of leadership is, I think, really important, because
mhm,
as a leader, I think that's what everyone in their mind sees, that, okay, as a leader, it means, oh, you're, a CEO of a company, or, you're a head of a department. And that's not necessarily what actually leadership means. So I don't think, people understand leadership,
Mm-hmm.
um, the way it should be understood, I guess. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of, again, stereotypes around leadership. So yeah, I would definitely recommend people to, read about leadership, or, really try to understand what leadership can look like in like different settings, in different people, as well as
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Having that network. And, you know, it's okay to interview people in different roles and asking them, what does a manager do? What
Mhm,
does that, what do you do? What do you enjoy about your work? And what do you feel most challenged by? And
mhm,
then when you see some subject matter experts in the organization, asking them about what do you love most about your job? And why
mhm,
didn't you go into management?
mhm,
Asking those questions and getting that insight from folks who've been in those roles for a while, that's really helpful.
mhm. Exactly. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people ask these questions. I think I like I when I used to work under managers, I never really paid attention to what they were doing, or like what their job looks like, or ask them questions. It was just like recently, I think it was in Avic where I was actually asked managers like, oh, okay, what do you actually do? What does that look like? Or
Mm-hmm.
can you share what your job responsibilities are, just to get an idea on, you know um, if that's something that I really want that, or would I enjoy doing it or not. And then if not, then I can look into other options.
Mm-hmm. Understanding ourselves is the key,
Yeah.
and it takes time. It takes
Hmm.
time to do that.
Yeah, definitely. So talking about, I think you mentioned before that you should ask in an interview what your support system looks like. Um so in an ideal environment, what would that support look like?
Hmm. There can be a lot of support internally and a lot of support externally. It depends on how much you're willing to work at it, right? So inside organizations, for example, in our organization, we have um, coaching. I'm now a certified leadership coach, so I do a lot of coaching. We have a mentorship program. We've got a sponsorship program that we use as well. And so those are some of the supports. Also, buddies, having buddies inside the organization that you can connect with, right? And then that social network, connecting with different people in the organization to understand who they are, what are they doing? How do I work with this person? How can I, right? So these are all the support systems. One of the things that I've just launched at AVIC is an emerging leaders program
Hmm.
for young people, or for people, not necessarily young, but for people who are looking to maybe migrate into a manager role. What do you need to understand about that? So this is a 1 year program. People are going to be doing a lot of different things in the program, presenting their ideas. What does leadership mean to them, and so on. But I think that that's going to be really helpful in developing a network, a
Hmm.
cohort of people that you can actually talk to about your aspirations and what do you want. And
Hmm.
so, again, having that connection with other people, but having that connection with your leader as
Hmm.
well. Feeling comfortable saying, this is what I want, this is what I aspire to. How can you help me get there?
Hmm.
And then externally, reaching out for mentors outside the organization.
Hmm.
For many years, I sacrificed my job. I sacrificed my career for my job.
Hmm. Interesting.
So I worked with great people. and I felt a lot of gratitude for the job, but I wasn't always fulfilled. And I
Mhm.
didn't feel like my career was moving forward.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
like this job. I like where I am. I'm comfortable, but I'm not moving forward.
Mhm.
Right. So when I met with a mentor, she was brutally honest with me when I explained what it was that I do. And she said to me, "You think small." I was like, ouch. Ouch. And then I thought, okay, there's something in there for me to learn. And she said, think big. So
Mhm.
she inspired me to think big. And
Mhm.
that was really helpful for me. So, and that wasn't that long ago. That was only maybe, 3, 4 years ago. So there's no stage of your life where you shouldn't have a mentor. Sometimes we need a mentor for a short period of time in our lives just to sort of wake us up and snap us out of something.
Mhm.
And there's a really great book that I read called How Women Rise. And it's brilliant. And it was really helpful for me because it helped me work through some of my personal challenges, and the list was long. But it was really helpful for me
Mhm.
to read through this book and to really understand how different women are to men, the
Mhm.
expectations that we have,
Mhm.
how the pressure that we put on ourselves. And
Mhm.
that's where I learned that I was sacrificing my career for a job.
Mhm.
And that was really critical for me. So, what did I need to do to get out of that so that I could focus on my career as
Mhm.
well?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think especially with uh, the difference that you mentioned with job and career, I think, yeah, that's something also that people forget sometimes, that it's different. A career
Mm-hmm.
is very different to a job,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes we kind of like infuse that in our minds, and
Right.
then it's like, you start thinking of your job as a career, or you don't really differentiate between them, and then you kind of like sometimes get complacent, and you're like, okay, I enjoy this job, I'm in this job, I'm fine, I'm comfortable, and you're like, okay, this is my career, but it's career is not a job.
Well, and for some people, that's fine. Some
Mhm.
people, they're happy doing what they're doing, and that's what they want for
Mhm.
their lives, and I admire that.
Mhm.
Great, good for you. You're happy. You're doing what you want to do. This
Mhm.
is what you have to offer. Great,
Mhm.
because what you have to offer is needed as well. We can't have everybody in the organization aspiring to be a CEO.
Mhm.
That's not going to happen. So we do need people who are quite content. But for people who are aspiring to a career and have aspirations to sort of shift and flow and move up or move lateral or whatever it might be, it's paying attention to that. And I find that oftentimes, and this is something that I found myself doing, was I was expecting that my hard work was going to get noticed and I was going to be given the promotion that I felt I deserved. And
Mhm.
that doesn't happen.
Mhm.
It doesn't happen. You have to speak up for yourself. You have to ask.
Mhm.
And, in the coaching that I'm doing now, the common thread I'm hearing through a lot of the conversations is, um, I want that role and nobody is giving it to me.
Mhm.
So the question I ask is, so have you had the conversation with your leader about it? Well, no. Then how are they supposed to know what you want? Well, I work hard. They should notice. That's the problem, right? If you want something, men don't hesitate to ask. This is what I want. I want that job. I want this. I want a promotion. I want a bonus. They don't hesitate to ask for what they want. We are a little bit more passive when it comes to that. And so now speaking up and saying, this is what I aspire to, this is what I want, how do I get there? All of a sudden, when they were coming back, I was saying, so how did the conversation go? They would say, wow, the leader was like, really? You're interested in that? I didn't know. All
Mhm.
right, let's get a path going for you. The
Mhm.
support was there. It's just
Yeah.
they didn't know that that's what they aspired to. So that's what I mean when we say sometimes we sacrifice the job, the career for the job. We
Mhm.
think that because we're doing such a great job, we're going to get the recognition we need to get the next job, to get the promotion, to get the raise, to be recognized, and it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, I definitely have like an example where this happened actually, where, I was working in a role, and, it had been like a couple of months, and I was seeing, different people in my team who were, going to conferences and meeting customers, and the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know you could do that. And I didn't know that there was this opportunity to do that. And, why is that person getting that opportunity and not me?
Mm,
And then initially you kind of like go into that self-doubt, like, oh, am I not good enough? Is that why I didn't get this opportunity? But then I spoke to my manager, and I was like, oh, like, I saw this, and I didn't know you could do that. Is that possible for me to do it? And they were like, oh, I didn't know you were interested. Okay, sure. And just like that, all that, like, self-doubt or whatever was gone. And I was like, oh, okay, all I had to do was ask. That's pretty much it.
just ask. That's it. You nailed it. Yeah, absolutely. And we
Mhm.
have a tendency not to do that. We as women,
Yeah, I think
and
that there's a bit of like an ego sometimes as well that comes in, where you kind of like think like, oh, why should I ask? Or they
mm,
should ask me, and those kind of things as well.
exactly, we expect that other people are going to understand what we need.
Mhm.
But the same thing in your relationships as well. If you don't tell your partner what you need, they can't guess,
Mhm.
right? We have to be clear about what we want and what we need. And so I find that women today are becoming a lot more assertive in that way.
Mhm.
And that's new
Mhm.
for men. They're
Mhm.
not used to seeing women in that light. And there's a lot of conversation around, how women are perceived when they start asking for what they want and saying what they need. And oh my gosh, it's so pushy and everything. Right. But women have been doing this forever, very comfortably, by the way.
Mhm.
And so the more that we do this, the more we ask for what we need, the more we tell people, this is what I want, the more it's just going to become the norm. It's going to become much more natural. And I would hope that people are teaching their children that, especially women,
Yeah.
to ask for what they need and to be clear about what they're expecting.
Yeah.
You might not always get what you want,
Yeah.
but at least in saying what you want, then it's clear the other person understands and knows. They
Mhm.
can't say, well, I didn't know, so that's
Mhm.
on you. Well, no, now you know. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah, that's true. So, what are your, future goals when it comes to your career, or
Hmm.
like, what's your vision when it comes to your role or your career?
Right. I think at this stage of my life, I don't have the same career aspirations that I had in my 20s or 30s.
Hmm.
So, really, what's important for me is working with good people, surrounding myself with people who inspire me,
Hmm.
being able to do great work,
Hmm.
um, being having the opportunity to be creative in my work. That's what's important to me right now.
Hmm.
I will not tolerate toxic people and toxic workplaces anymore. It's just not worth it for me.
Hmm.
And so when we were talking about the interview process, I ask a lot of questions about an organization. I do a lot of research
Hmm.
about an organization, and I am not shy to ask the uncomfortable questions
Hmm.
about an organization because I want to be sure that I'm joining a company that has the right values, but also a team that
Mm,
I'm going to be happy to work with. So,
mm,
connecting with the different people on the team before I
mm,
join is really important for me. Knowing who's going to be, my circle,
mm,
my social network is
mm,
really important for me.
mm,
And so that's what I aspire to. Now, I've only recently finished my coaching, certified coaching um, and designation, and I'm working towards another with the International Coaching Federation. And
mm,
so my long-term goal then is to offer coaching services as a consultant. So
yeah,
that'll be the long-term goal for me as I sort of migrate out of the corporate environment at some phase of my career.
yeah, that's amazing. And I think I usually end the episode with asking guests on, share 5 things about yourself that you're most proud of.
Mm. Mm. I think the one thing that comes to mind first is my perseverance. As much as I found myself discouraged at certain stages of my career, I was able to push through and persevere. So that's one.
Mhm,
The other is the education. So investing in education is something I'm very proud of because I did that while I was working full time. And
mhm,
for people who have done that, you know how difficult it can be. So that's the other thing. I've also managed to create some financial security for myself and for my husband. He's also contributed to that, of course,
mhm,
but it was something that I needed to work at. I didn't grow up in an affluent family, and I sometimes experienced financial instability because my
mhm,
parents didn't know how to create financial security.
mhm,
So that was something I never wanted to feel. I'm very proud of that. I'm also very proud of my marriage, building a life with someone,
mhm,
learning and growing with each other
mhm,
is something that I'm very proud of. We never just threw in the towel, we
mhm,
worked at it.
mhm,
Um, and a lot of the training that I offered throughout the years, like conflict management and communication and active listening, served us well in our marriage because we were able to practice,
mhm,
right? And learn to really listen to each other and to communicate with kindness and empathy. So he's the person I have the most fun with and the person that I trust the most in this world. So I'm very proud of that. And the other thing is that certification as a leadership coach. It's something I've wanted to do for years. And I'm
mhm,
so grateful that AVIC has invested in this program with me.
mhm,
I now get to coach people in my organization, and those connections, those moments of trust mean a lot to me.
mhm,
Everyone aspires to more in life.
mhm,
Everyone tries to be the best versions of themselves. And the fact that we can explore that together, that gives my life and my career purpose.
mhm.
And so those are the things I'm most proud of.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, and yeah, I just wanted to point out here that, you know, especially the thing that you mentioned about financial insecurity, I think, especially as women, I mean, it's a fact that, women usually feel very uncomfortable in managing their finances. And, you know, is there any advice you would like to give when it comes to that?
Educate yourself. Educate yourself, right? Read up. Um, invest in a financial advisor.
Mhm,
Get them to make out a plan with you,
mhm,
and then stick to it. There was a book written many years ago, but the author always said, "Pay yourself first.
mhm,
Pay yourself first."
mhm,
And that always stayed with me. So I always had, little here, little there, a little sock there, a little this. I'm kind of like a squirrel in that way. I've got all these little, piles of nuts everywhere. But I think that works for me. That
mhm,
gives me a sense of security in a sense. But finding out what works for you and really getting the help, not hesitating to ask for help and talking to people and finding people that you can trust that are going to guide you in the right direction because um, more than ever, we need that financial security. The market, the economy, we know fluctuates from year to year,
Mhm.
and we need to make sure that we're okay.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And yeah, I hope women start um, educating themselves on, financial security, personal finances, or investment. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think obviously we will end this episode here, but really grateful to you to come on here and share your learning, share your experiences. And I'm absolutely sure that a lot of people would be thankful as well after listening to you. So, again,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for coming on, and I hope you have a great week ahead.
Thank you so much, Priya. Thank you for thinking of me and for inviting me. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and have a great week, you as well.
All right. Thank you so much.